1. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us on this online platform to discuss the Bannock Street closure. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to learn more about this project. My name is Ashley Grace. I will be acting as the moderator for this evening's meeting. I am a project manager and community designer in the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. In my role at the city, I not only manage the design of major multimodal projects, but I also work to coordinate multimodal efforts throughout Southeast Denver. That includes Council Districts 4, 6, and 10. I'm joined by my colleague, Jay Decker, who is a Transportation and Innovation Manager in the Transportation Planning team. Jay is managing the Phase 1 installation of the Bannock Street closure. We're also joined by Mark Bernstein, the Downtown Area Planner for the Planning, Design, and Construction Group in the Department of Parks and Recreation. Mark is managing Phase 2 of this project, so we'll be hearing from both of them about Phase 1 and Phase 2. I'd also like to mention that there are a number of other staff members from both departments, as well as partners from outside the city, including Eric from the Civic Center Conservancy, that have helped us get to where we are today. We'll continue to be involved as we move forward, so thank you all for your help and support on this project. And a special thanks to Councilman Hines for his help in spreading the word about this project and for all that he does to represent the constituents of Council District 10. Before we kick off, I want to first of all apologize. We are all, as you all probably know, we're all new to navigating this virtual world, and we're working out kinks as we do. For instance, this slide, we didn't mean for that to be highlighted, but that's the highlighted portion is the URL for this project. So you're welcome to jot that down. I know it's quite lengthy. We also have a smaller URL at tinyurl.com/Bannock Street. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of how tonight is going to be run. Before we kick off, I want to provide some information. We'll be starting with a presentation. It'll be a live presentation that you can follow along via the webinar. We will stop for question and answers a couple times. We also are going to have live polls. After the meeting, again, you can find information on the website that is listed there. And then if you have specific questions about Phase 1 or Phase 2, you can email the project leads, Jay Decker at james.decker@denvergov.org and mark.bernstein@denvergov.org. We will make sure that there's updated information on the web page. I apologize that there are actually a few issues on this slide. And I just want to also mention, as you all can clearly tell, we are all working from home during this unprecedented time, and I want to thank everyone for doing their part by staying home. And I also want to let you know that we too are working from home, so I apologize in advance if you hear dogs or children in the background. We will do our best to keep everything quiet, but those are just some of the fun challenges we get to deal with as we navigate this new environment. So a quick overview of the agenda this evening. We are going to first cover the history and planning behind this project that really brought us to where we are today. We'll then jump into the details of what's happening and why we're and what we call Phase 1 in terms of what's the design look like, what's the schedule. We'll then pause for some question and answers. Then we'll get into Phase 2 and talk again about the vision, the schedule, and again have more time for question and answers. So as I mentioned, we are going to be doing some polling. So this is kind of a new way that we're trying to gather feedback, as we, typically in an online or when we're meeting with you all in person, we have a lot of activities to gather feedback. Since we don't have that, we're looking into our polling options. And so today we're using a platform called Poll Everywhere. So the way that you can join us and give us some feedback using this tool is go to pollev.com/JDecker829. Once you go to that page, first of all, we recommend you do that actually in your cell phone if you can. That makes it a little bit easier to continue to follow along with this presentation. But you can also open up a new window on your computer if your cell phone isn't working, and follow along with our polls there. But again, we found that it works best if you use your cell phone for the polling and then follow along on your computer. So once you get to the poll everywhere, you will be prompted to log in by essentially entering your name. And then as we get to each different polling question through the presentation, you will be prompted on that polling screen with a new poll. So let's give that a try, and starting out with our first poll. So our first poll is, as Denver's first national historic landmark, Civic Center is visited by many who live, work, and play in downtown. Which one best describes you? Do you live in the area? Do you work in the area? Do you go to school in the area? Or do you just visit Civic Center? So again, if you go to pollev.com/jdecker829, you can participate in the polling effort. So I'm going to give everyone just a few moments to kind of work out this new polling technology and see if we can get more responses here. And you all can see what our live polling results are. So far it looks like the majority of folks on the call work in the area, which is great. And we even have folks who live in the area. So definitely a lot of folks very, very familiar with Civic Center, which is very exciting. Give that just a few more seconds here. Oh, and we even have folks who just come to visit. That's very cool that you are on the call and joining us, so thank you for that. Great, all right, so A, nice work everyone. We've got a lot of participation in this poll. That's very exciting. B, it looks like we've got a lot of people very familiar with the area, so that's also very exciting. We're going to keep moving now with our presentation. If you give me just a moment. All right, we're going to have to, our first technical difficulty. So hold on just one moment. I'm going to re-pull up the screen here. Maybe Jay, do you want to kick us off with a quick introduction to why we're here today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. As Ashley introduced me earlier, my name is Jay Decker. I'm the Transportation and Innovation Manager for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I have specifically been working on phase 1 of this project, of which we're about to jump into to talk about the planning and vision of the overall concept of the project. And then I will get into the details of phase 1, which will be completed here this early summer. And then Mark Bernstein will hand it over to him to talk about phase 2 of the project. All right, I hope everyone can see my screen. It looks like maybe Ashley got dropped off, and so I will now be filling in for her for this portion. So again, apologize for any technical difficulties. Internet virtual meetings are fun and we are learning, so bear with us. Starting off, I wanted to talk about the recently adopted Denverite Plan, which is Denver's comprehensive plan for the next 20 years. It was actually adopted sometime last year in the spring, had been occurred over a couple years of collecting feedback, really envisioning different aspects of transportation and environment and housing and art and culture and basically everything that makes Denver great. Some of the big takeaways from that project was actually how DOTI should be rethinking the right-of-way. First and foremost, it talks about how we can create great places by maximizing our public right-of-way. And so really we wanted to rethink how we could do that to provide better amenities to our residents. It also talks about how we need to create and preserve our parks and public spaces, and then also to leverage arts and support creative placemaking, and then to also to expand our public infrastructure, and then finally create and enhance environments that support physical activity and healthy living. When we think about all those topics, we really think about the Bannock Street project, and we'll be able to show you here how those were reflected in just a second. Where this project comes from, and I'm just going to touch real quick on some of the planning documents and then give it back over to Mark once we talk about phase 2 to go a little bit more in depth in them, but wanted to show that this is a project that has been in the works for quite a while. It has been identified in the Civic Center design guidelines that were completed in 2009. It made its way into the outdoor downtown plan, and then the Denver Moves downtown plan, which is scheduled to be completed this year. It is also reflected in that. More so, as many of you are familiar with the area, Bannock Street is regularly closed for special events. Very frequently during our warmer summer months, it can be closed for weeks at a time, and so it is very commonly closed to vehicles and already acts as an event and public space off and on. To take it a step further, we actually pilot tested closing Bannock for a good 2 months in 2017 during the peak of summer, and we really wanted to test the idea on what would happen if we permanently closed this space. And what we found out is that it really had no negative traffic impacts whatsoever to the region. And so that made us much more comfortable to go ahead and actually start in on this project. Prior to jumping into the project, we really wanted to do a nationwide search just to see what was out there so we're not reinventing the wheel. We want some precedent on kind of what works. And so one of the iconic projects in Philadelphia is actually Dilworth Plaza. As you can see on the right, that building there is their city hall, and the area, the public space you're seeing right now is the final result. Prior to this, this was basically just a big asphalt parking lot. It was city hall employees were able to park there and really nothing else. It really wasn't a big addition to the community. It wasn't a public space. Certainly no fountains or spaces for artists or any sort of markets or anything like that. And so they went through a very similar process to what we're doing now. And this is actually what the end result turned out to be. Another great image is Civic Center in San Francisco, California. This again is their city hall, and they had even more similar landscape to what we had, which is a couple bisecting streets in addition to a big parking lot in front of their city hall. And as you can see, they did a really great job with providing landscaping and then an appropriate amount of open space so they can program for ice skating rinks. They regularly have recreation, sports out there. It's a big public gathering space and event space, and it's been very well received. Finally, one close to home, one we know well, is Union Station in Denver. Prior to the recent transformation here, this really was just kind of a big parking lot. It was mostly an unused space and certainly was not maximizing its potential. And you can see here right in our backyard, very similar, if we rethink the right-of-way in creative ways and coordinate with parks and placemaking and all of those elements, we can truly make great new public spaces where before it would be a parking lot or, in Bannock's case, a local street. After doing our search, we got together and we really wanted to figure out what is the overall vision and goals of this project. And what we landed on is that we wanted to transform Bannock Street into a celebrated public space that functions, as the front porch to the city and county building. We wanted it to establish a pedestrian-friendly space where people can gather, socialize, stay, and play. It needs to act as a complement to Civic Center Park, and by doing so, is function as a new gateway into the park. We really wanted to strengthen the connection between city and county building and the Civic Center Park. Right now with Bannock Street, it is very disjointed. You have a great park, and you do have to cross a road to get to the city and county building. And then finally, we wanted to improve the event space for our wonderful event organizers. And one great way of doing that is by permanently closing the street. We no longer have to worry about the logistics of traffic control, barriers, bagging the meters so no one can park, things like that. Basically queuing it up to make it easier to hold events there and then the actual environment will be much better for events as well. When we were thinking about how we could accomplish this project, we really wanted to be creative so we could act quickly. At the city, we're very versed in kind of a traditional plan, design, build approach. That can take many years. Certainly we want a lot of public input. Then we have typically a very large, longer design process, and then ultimately we need to do construction. And for a bigger transformative project like this, oftentimes that can take several years. And so while we got that process started, we wanted to act quickly so we can actually implement and improve the space in real time. So what we have decided to do is we have broken it into a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 is what I'll be talking about shortly. We're using temporary materials and we were able to go in and actually retrofit the space quickly, while phase 2 is underway. And so we're able to improve upon the space, learn from it, and then we will get the full transformation in due time. Phase 1 is what we're calling the initial closure. As you can see on the right, this is an image from New York City, and it was a bit of an inspiration for phase 1. They closed down a section of street in between a park and created a new public plaza, and then made sure they celebrated it and made it warm and inviting by bringing in a public artist and actually doing a very vibrant and large street mural. And so what we wanted to do is that we're able to close the street now so we can create that safe and accessible public space. We've been able to bring in a local artist, Pat Milbury, to help us celebrate the space and paint a nice, wonderful, inviting mural to act as an inviting gateway into Civic Center Park. By closing the street, we're able to improve the safety and actually strengthen the biking and walking connections along that corridor. And then potentially most importantly, is that by acting quickly, we can learn from the space. We can figure out what works here and what doesn't. Do we need more shade? Do we need a water feature? You know, this and that we can test over time, and that'll actually inform phase 2. So we're able to act quickly, and then our end result will be much better as well. Phase 2 is what we're calling the permanent transformation. And so we are starting the formal plan design build process to actually transform Bannock. But like I said, this does take a couple of years, and that's a good reason why, is because we want plenty of time for broad and extensive stakeholder engagement. And I'm happy to announce that that'll actually be starting this year, and Mark Bernstein will be able to get to that in a minute. All right, so now I'll transition to phase 1 and some of the details that you can expect to see on the street here shortly. First and foremost, I wanted to highlight the various city agencies and a lot of our nonprofit and local stakeholders that have played a role in this phase 1 project. We wanted to make sure that it worked from a lot of angles. While it is a street, it's going to function a lot like a park, and we wanted to add a public art element. So of course we needed to bring in arts and venues, and then the space itself is a very vibrant event space. And so we've made sure that we've coordinated very closely with the Office of Special Events to make sure it functions very well in both aspects. And then we also were coordinating with some of our local stakeholders, Civic Center Conservancy, Public Library, Denver Art Museum, Downtown Denver Partnership, and many more that I didn't have the ability to show on here because we ran out of space. What resulted was, over the process of about 6 or so months, we've been able to refine the design, work with the artists and finish that, and we're right now at the point where we are constructing. So there's a lot going on in this photo, so I'm happy to walk you through some of the various components. First thing you might be able to see right here is the very bright and vibrant mural. It's a little downplayed here, just so we can see a little bit more, so it will be much brighter and more vibrant when we get it on the ground. But as you can see, the mural does cover almost the entire block. It's about 0.8 of an acre, So it is one of the largest murals located in the state of Colorado, if not the largest currently, or will be. And you can see the location of the trees that will have located in planters. This will help kind of create the space and make it feel much less like a road and more so like there is that strong connection between the city and county building and the park. We also intend to have tables and chairs out there as well. And so that can kind of be used for cafe seating and, maybe working outside on a nice day and things like that. And you can also see that all the sidewalk and bike lane access has remained unchanged. The only thing in regards to that is there will be no more vehicles. So it actually is a much safer environment for both of those modes. The one thing that I want to highlight is on the left of your screen. Might be a little bit hard to see, but you can see those black dots that are kind of snaking over to the left. Unfortunately, we were not able to fully close down both ends of the street from vehicular traffic. The reason why is where those black dots kind of snake in to that sidewalk is the only vehicular access location into Civic Center Park. So we needed to maintain access for McNichols parking, special events, the Civic Center Eat food trucks, and any sort of park maintenance vehicles. And so while the street will be fully closed off from any sort of public vehicular access, we did need to add that little bit of a drive lane in for city authorized vehicles and Civic Center Conservancy authorized vehicles as well. This image shows it at the ground plane, so a little bit easier to visualize. From what you can see on the top is the profile view, so you can see that the sidewalk, the bike lanes, and kind of the distribution of the planters will still maintain all of the transportation elements through there. And in the bottom image, you can actually see kind of what the mural will look like when it's down there, some of the, what it would look and feel like to, have lunch out there, the tables and chairs. And then also you can see via those brown cylinders where that access drive is and kind of how it's going to look and feel. So it still will be safe to kind of walk through that area, but we're not going to allow people to set up in that area since technically authorized vehicles will be allowed in there, although there won't be many of them. And this is an image. This is actually from the 14th Street side, so looking north down Bannock. This is the section of the street that is 100% closed off from vehicles, even authorized ones. And so the whole street is available for pedestrians, bicyclists, really anyone to use and enjoy. And this is a depiction of how an event could potentially look in the new space. So as you can see, all of our wonderful events, Pride Fest, Tacolandia, Parade of Lights, things like that, will not have any issue continuing to exist in this area. It'll just be a much better kind of area with the trees and the colorful mural and things like that. On the left, you can see an image that discusses the public parking. Because we are removing vehicular access on this block, we did need to remove a number of parking spots that were located in front of City Hall. While the public parking, public meter spots were not replaced, on the image on the left, and you can see a much bigger image on the website for future reference, there is still quite a large number of public parking spaces, either metered on street or off street, where you can still have convenient access. And then all of the ADA spots that were located prior onto the street have been relocated to 14th, right on that top corner. And so we made sure we relocated that to the closest spots possible. And so we are still maintaining ADA access for parking as well. On the right, you can see that, again, while we are prohibiting vehicular access down the street, there are still numerous routes of which should not cause much delay to still get into the area to access the art museum, the library, any of your favorite bars or restaurants, or if you live down there. So still plenty of options. And again, when we did test this out back in 2017, we really saw no adverse traffic impacts. As far as the timeline goes, I'm excited to say that construction has actually started. Right now, they're out there removing the meters and the meter heads. They're drilling the coring holes, as you can see in the image down there, for those big metal bollards we'll have out there to close from vehicular access. Signing, striping, all of that is currently underway right now. Once all of the heavy construction elements are complete, we're going to go ahead and street sweep and power wash the whole area. And that's when we'll be bringing in Pat Milbury, the local artist, to actually lay the groundwork for the very bright and vibrant mural that he'll be doing. And then once he's complete, we will be opening Bannock Street back to the public. And we'll be excited to see people start using it. One important caveat, due to the COVID-19 crisis that we're going through right now, unfortunately, we will not be putting any of the trees and street furniture out there, just because we don't want to encourage any public gatherings at the moment until those are allowed. The street will be very similar to what you may have heard or even ridden or walked down a lot of the streets that have been closed within our parks and in some of our neighborhoods. And so it will still be a safe location to walk, roll, or recreate. We just won't encourage any sort of public gathering in this space until it is safe to do so. And with that, I will open it back up for questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Jay. I am back, so thank you very much, everyone, for bearing with us through those technical difficulties, and nice work, Jay. So we've definitely got a number of questions rolling in, so I'm going to start with the first one. So Jay, there have been a number of challenges with automobiles and other vehicles parked on the sidewalks and the bicycle cycle track. I think I personally know I've seen a number of media crews, etc. How will this project address those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so without any vehicular access to this area, unless they're authorized city personnel, there should not be any sort of vehicles queuing along the cycle tracks or anything like that. That is currently illegal in Colorado, and unfortunately we've done probably not a great job of enforcing that right in city and county building, but because of this project, that should not be an issue going forward. Great,
thank you. Another question, how were special event managers involved in the project's decisions, particularly those special event managers who manage events in Civic Center Park?
Oh, sorry, you broke up a little bit there. What'd you say, Ashley?
How were the special event managers involved in the project's decisions, especially those that do a lot of events in the park?
Yeah, great question. And so we have worked extremely closely with the Office of Special Events. They have been included throughout the entire process for the design for this. And so any consideration around what things we can put in the street have come from them. And so what we have decided to do per their recommendations is that all of the tree planters, tables and chairs, bollards, things like that are fully removable. And so the idea is that all of these great elements will actually be removed as needed for events, and it will kind of transform back into a blank canvas as needed. And so this will not inhibit any sort of events in any way at all. If anything, we hope that the special events will really utilize the trees and want them to be there during their event instead of just moving them out of the way. Same for the bollards. We'll no longer require any sort of traffic control plans. You don't need to bag the meters. You don't need to close the street. We've done all of that already. And so it really is going to make it much simpler for events to be held out here, in addition to actually being cheaper as well. So all around should improve the event organizers' ability to hold really good events on this space.
Awesome. One more question before we move on to phase 2 and hearing from Mark. But can you maybe just clarify, Jay, with this first phase, is the curb line going to be modified, and or will the curb ramps be modified?
Because this is a phase 1 kind of quick action type project, we're not changing any of the hardscape. So none of the curbs, none of the curb ramps, Nothing like that is actually being changed at all. We are adding a few additional ADA elements, some different pavers, and we have some considerations around signage and for the blind community as well to make sure it is safe. So it actually is going to be a lot safer. But as far as any sort of big concrete changes, we haven't done that because that's reserved for phase 2.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jay. It looks like I will go ahead and we're going to try this again, me sharing my screen. So if everyone can, again, bear with us, hopefully this works. And Jay, hopefully you can jump on if we have another issue. But all right. So with that, we're going to hand it off to Mark to get us talking about phase 2. Mark, take it away.
Good evening. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Jay. Really appreciate the overview and the information. I want to give quick kudos to all the operation teams that have been working collaboratively on the implementation thus far and over the coming weeks, and just to all of our project partners too to get us to this point with phase 1. I can tell you from the point of view of Denver Parks and Recreation, we're extremely excited about phase 2 and what it represents for overall for Civic Center. So we're really excited to continue the collaboration with the Department of Transportation Infrastructure and with all of our other key stakeholders in the area. So let's go ahead and jump right in, please. So I just wanted to highlight, I think it's important for us to really understand, as we learned in the early presentation, that Civic Center is Denver's first national historic landmark. And so, we are, as we delve into the second phase, which is going to focus on the long-term permanent design and transformation of Bannock into a grand civic public space, we will be looking at Civic Center as a whole. And so it's really important to understand the history. And so over 100 years ago, Civic Center was imagined by Mayor Spear and the city leaders at that time to become the civic and cultural heart of Denver. And today it still serves as the jewel of our park system. Civic Center is really at the crossroads of our government, our culture, a lot of our commerce, and even our community. It helps bridge the Golden Triangle neighborhood to the upper downtown area. Civic Center is a 12-acre park that serves as a respite, but it also is a place where we come to gather and to celebrate culture, and it's really a way for us to show who we are as a city. Civic Center is also a great collection of Greek Revival architecture, from the McNichols Civic Center building to the Voorhees Memorial at the north of the park, down to the Greek Theater to the south of the park. But Civic Center was really originally designed and laid out based on a very simple Beaux-Arts style plan of strong symmetry. The yellow dashed line that you see running from left to right on your screen is our civic axis that connects the city and county building all the way up to the state capitol building. And then the blue dashed line you see running from top to bottom is our cultural axis that connects all of our culturals, whether it's the Denver Art Museum or the Public Library, up to the north into downtown where Civic Center Station is, as well as the mall. Next, please.
Great. So we're going to try this again. Meanwhile, Jay, you might want to queue up the presentation in case it crashes, but another poll for everyone. This one asks, how often do you visit Civic Center Park? So again, if you go to pollev.com, or maybe if you just kept it up, this new poll should be prompted on your screen. pollev.com/jdecker829. Let us know, how often do you visit Civic Center Park? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, or only for special events? And hopefully you all can see the live feed as that comes in. And you'll notice there is a bit of a lag in terms of us presenting this to you and you all seeing it, which is why there's a little bit of a time gap. So awesome. I am seeing lots of results coming in, which is very exciting. By the way, we have nearly 50 attendees on the call, which is very exciting. All right, looks like we have a lot of folks who are in this area daily. That's the majority of folks on the call, followed by, it kind of has been going back and forth, but looks like the rest of folks are here either monthly or weekly. So people, again, are extremely familiar with this park. And I am yet again freezing, Jay. So do you want to try taking over? If everyone could bear with us again, as I think we're going to be done with the polling after this.
So while you're transitioning over, I do want to just chime in and say that this is fantastic to see these results. Really appreciate everyone's participation. We are, as mentioned, we are going to be transitioning to the phase 2 design of Bannock, and in which that will include a pretty extensive public engagement process. So a lot more to come in that regard. But this information that we're gathering tonight is going to be helpful in us really understanding as a beginning point who you are and really kind of how people are currently using Civic Center and how we should be thinking about Bannock going into the future. So do appreciate that information. The other thing this also tells me too, when I look at the results, is that Civic Center really serves a unique role being in the heart of downtown, in that it does serve as a neighborhood park for the Golden Triangle neighborhood, Capitol Hill, all the other surrounding neighborhoods in this upper downtown part of Denver. But it also serves as a regional destination too. When I think of all the cultural events that happen and the hundreds of thousands of people that come to Civic Center to really enjoy the different events that are offered throughout the course of the summer, spring, and fall. So are we back up and running?
Yes, I am going to pull up my screen. Somebody has pulled up a phase 2. Is that Jay? If that's you, do you mind advancing? Awesome. So a couple more slides. Great.
Right. So as Jay mentioned in his portion looking at phase 1, there are some planning precedents that have been completed over the years, really with this overarching desire and goal to create a downtown that is vibrant, that's thriving, creating a downtown that is really a network of green spaces, public spaces that really supports our outdoor lifestyle. I mean, being outdoors is really, it's part of our DNA as Denverites, and this addition of Bannock and extension of Civic Center going across Bannock up to the city and county building is going to be an integral part of that vision. In 2005, 15 years ago, the Denver Civic Center Park Master Plan was completed. It was a fantastic document, visionary document that really put forth the framework and the ideas going into the future for the park. It really touched a lot on programming, as well as this idea of a nonprofit organization to really support a lot of the workings in the operations and management of the park going into the future. And that was the creation of the Civic Center Conservancy. 2 years later, in 2007, through a collaboration with the Downtown Denver Partnership and the city, the Downtown Area Plan was created, in which one of the 5 vision elements was this idea of a green city and the idea of how important our public realm is in the downtown core. Then 2 years later, in 2009, the Civic Center design guidelines were drafted and adopted that really began to look at the spatial organization of the park and looked at the materiality. It also began to put the framework into place for future ideas that the master plan recommended 2 or 4 years prior to that. And then lastly, in 2017, the Outdoor Downtown Plan was completed, which is Parks and Recreation's 20-year strategic plan looking at the downtown core and the future of our parks and public spaces, and really recognizing that it's not just about planning for new parks and maintaining them, but also how are we programming, how are we activating. So those were really the kind of the planning precedents that led up to the whole idea of Bannock and how Bannock could become a place for people. Next, please. And continue with the planning precedents, there were specific recommendations that came out of that. On the left-hand side of your screen there is the master plan from 2005. What I wanted to highlight specifically with this is the fact that even in 2005, there was a vision for something different for Bannock, recognizing that Bannock had a greater purpose beyond just for moving cars, but to really become an iconic space, a transition between the park and the city and county building. And then in 2009, with the Civic Center design guidelines, all the circles that you see there really began to highlight the nodes. Or I even look at this and begin thinking of how Civic Center today is really a series of outdoor rooms. And with the extension and expansion of Civic Center into Bannock, Bannock becomes a whole new opportunity. It becomes a new outdoor space. And in turn, when I think about the history of Civic Center, this is going to become a whole new chapter for the history of the park. And then lastly, in the Outdoor Downtown Plan, there were 4 iconic projects that the plan recommended. These were large, iconic projects that would really move the needle on the vision for the Outdoor Downtown Plan, and one of which was this idea of creating a flexible gathering place, a place that where people could gather, where we can celebrate our culture, where we can really identify ourselves and just be together, but also have the kind of spaces to where it functions on a day-to-day basis as well. Next. So when I think about Civic Center as a whole, there's a lot of significance to Civic Center, whether it's the historic resources and the aspect that Civic Center is Denver's National Historic Landmark, and the role that Civic Center has played in the evolution of the city, the way that Civic Center has been the place for people to gather, for rallies, political rallies, for us to express ourselves, and for us to really just gather as a community, to the way Civic Center is sustainable and resilient, from the 25,000 square feet of beds that we have in the park to help support pollinators and birds and bees, to having predators in the park and wildlife, as well as our urban forest. When we think about climate change and how are we going to mitigate that and the impacts of the urban heat island effect, 12 acres of green space is the kind of respite that we need as we begin to continue to grow and densify in downtown. And then cultural, again, being that place where we can celebrate culture, whether it's Independence Eve or even having one of the largest outdoor collections of public art, as we see here with some of the bronze sculptures or with the Ellen True murals that are in the park. And what about those gatherings when the Broncos win the Super Bowl and we have our rallies and millions of people come into our heart of the city in Civic Center? So it serves a very strong role culturally for us. And then recreationally, when I was mentioning earlier about how Civic Center can function as your neighborhood park or it can function as a regional destination, there's so many opportunities for people to really get out and recreate and to bolster their own health and well-being. Next.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we're going to do our next poll. This poll, and hopefully this one will go better. It's on a different person's computer. It says, what is your favorite activity in Civic Center Park? So again, I think you can only select one with this poll, but this is again very helpful for us to collect feedback to better understand what folks really enjoy about the park. Again, if you go to pollev.com/jdecker829, you can input your answer in terms of what your favorite activity in the park is. So we'll give everyone just a few moments to fill that out. It looks like, all right, we're getting a number of folks to participate in the poll, which is great. Looks like most folks attend activities in the park, whether that's Civic Center Eats, those free fitness class. Oh, never mind, that just went down. All right, live polling is fun. We'll give it a few more seconds here. Okay. Pretty split. There's a lot of different reasons people are coming to the park, which is great. Other things, attend special events, including Cinco de Mayo, Pride Fest, Taste of Colorado, all those things that are so unique and special to Denver. Looks like those are pretty high, as well as just going to relax, read, eat, watch people work, etc. Awesome. Wonderful. Jay, do you want to keep us rolling? Thanks.
Great. So I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A at the end, so I'm going to move along here a little quicker. The vision, again, because we are just starting to embark on phase 2 of this project. The vision has not been set per se. This is the vision statement taken from the Outdoor Downtown plan, but I incorporated this because I felt like this really, I think, captures and embodies what we are thinking of for Bannock in terms of special events, innovative use of public spaces, and really just recognizing that this is going to be a place for the people of Denver to socialize and to celebrate our own art, culture, and heritage. And some of the preliminary goals that we've identified too is this idea that it's really going to be important for us to create a public space that is iconic and one that also balances the historic context of Civic Center while complementing the park's design. And then followed by transforming Bannock into a place of prominence and a place where, again, we can celebrate Denver's identity and culture for today and going into the future. And then with so many of our public spaces, it's going to be critical that we design a space that's welcoming to all, that's inclusive, and one, again, that's flexible to support everyday activation, but also those special events. I know there was a question about how are we engaging the special event organizers, and so we do know that Bannock plays a critical role in supporting our special events, and we know it will continue to do so. And so we will be going into the planning and design phase with that in mind as well. And then also, how are we looking at Bannock as a new public space that's going to be sustainable and resilient within the context of the urban landscape? Next. And so just as Jay shared with everyone earlier, we also have some illustrations, just kind of thinking ahead of what phase 2 might be. I want to emphasize and reiterate that this actual design still is yet to be determined via a public engagement process. This was just an idea of what it might look like. Some of the things that we do know, there was a question earlier about access ramps and so on and so forth. The idea with Bannock going into the future is that there is no curb. Everything that you can think of in terms of the physical attributes of what a street is will be no longer. This is now going to be a fully accessible plaza space. The materials that we're going to use will be compatible with the materials of Civic Center, and they will be in compliance with the Civic Center design guidelines and standards. We'll also look at, per the goals I was just sharing a moment ago, we're going to be looking at opportunities to really grow our urban forest and bringing in green infrastructure. So this is going to be a public space that's going to provide opportunities, again, for day-to-day use, as well as special events year-round. Next, please. And then here's just a vision of what that might look like on a event day. Next. So our timeline is starting in the spring with public engagement and concept design happening concurrently. As you can see in this simple diagram, it's going to be an iterative process where we will go through a public engagement process. Given the uncertainties of where we are today and in public engagement, we're not quite sure yet exactly what tools we will be using moving forward. However, we will be putting together a public engagement strategic plan on ensuring that we do get input from all stakeholders, not only the ones that Jay had identified that were engaged in developing the design for phase 1, but we are planning to expand that outreach even beyond to ensure that we are hearing from everybody in this process. So the plan is that concept design will extend up through winter of 2021, and then we will go into a competitive selection process to identify a design consultant who will work with us hand in hand in taking that concept design and helping us then develop the final design and construction documents. And then in spring of 2022, we will go through yet another selection process to hire a contractor for the implementation piece, which will occur from fall of 2022 until spring of 2023. So our end goal is to complete the complete long-term permanent transformation of Bannock by spring of 2023. Next.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you both, Jay and Mark. Their contact info for phase is on the screen. Again, phase 1, that initial closure, feel free to follow up with James or Jay Decker, which his email is james.decker@denvergov.org. And that longer term vision, feel free to follow up with Mark Bernstein at mark.bernstein@denvergov.org. Also, if you go to the Q&A section under that, you will see the tiny URL that we have created, so that will take you directly to the project page where we will post this presentation in the coming week or so. So with that, we have time for some questions, which is great. I'm going to start with a question for you, Mark. When will we be closing Broadway and Lincoln in order to fully unify the park as a place for people?
Wow, that's a great question, and definitely visionary. There have been conversations over the years, or I should say there's been visionary conversations over the years of how wonderful would it be to close Bannock and Lincoln. That is a much larger, more complex question that honestly requires the state as well. We did engage the state architect years ago and had that conversation. There were also some concept designs that were developed that even contemplated this idea of ramping up over Lincoln and Broadway. So I personally, from my point of view, as a urban designer and planner, would love to see us kind of complete that whole connection and linkage of the civic axis from the city and county building up to state capitol, but there are no current plans at this time.
Got it. Thanks, Mark. Sounds like one of the bold ideas to capture in phase 2 as we move forward.
Absolutely.
This one I'm going to throw over to Jay. I'm going to combine a couple questions, but it has to do with bikes. So first of all, will we be widening the bike facilities as part of this project now that there isn't parking on the roadway? And 2, how will bike access be managed, especially during special events?
Yeah, great question. And so the northbound cycle track in its current form is not going to be touched at all. And so it's kind of right around 7 or 8 feet wide. And so that one's going to remain untouched. And then the southbound bike lane, which is the one that's currently in the street with the cars out of the way, we're actually going to be moving it right up against the curb and then widening it by a foot or 2. It's around 6 or 7 foot wide. And then as you could saw from that diagram, and please go to the website if you'd like to take a closer look, it really kind of opens back up for that whole street. So while there will be that painted bike lane there, because there's no vehicles, it really is kind of a shared street. And so really the whole street, it really is for the bike lane for that aspect. And then also for events, we are closely working with our Office of Special Events. It is a pretty common issue that during events, the bike access is not maintained. That is something that is still to be determined. It really depends on the event footprint. We've gotten better in recent years about doing that, on closing one of the bike lanes, but then keeping one of the wider sidewalks open and having kind of a dismount zone where you can still filter in and out. And so we're looking at options on how we can improve in that. And then also, just to end with that, what we talked about for phase 1 is I wouldn't call it a pilot, but it's, we're able to try things. And so if we're finding that there are still mobility issues, we always prioritize bike and ped access at Dottie. And so those are things we can play with and then ultimately decide on what we do to improve that in the long term for phase 2 as well. And so constantly learning and trying to get better. So I appreciate the questions.
Great. Thanks, Jay. I think we're getting a number of questions also about ADA and accessibility as it relates to this new space. So one of the first questions is, with these new elements kind of in the right of way, how will these elements take into consideration people who face mobility challenges? Jay, do you want to maybe start, and then Mark can finish up?
Yeah, so very great question. For the process for the design of phase 1, we actually brought in an ADA design consultant. So we did have quite a lot more expertise than we typically do on staff at Dottie. And as part of that, we were able to find a number of improvements we can make as far as the access. With that said, like I said, we aren't changing any of the curb ramps, any of the hardscape, anything like that. And so there's nothing truly transformative about this project. That's going to be reserved for phase 2. But we are improving access. Number one, there will not be any vehicles in this area anymore. And so that mid-block crossing, and then also the crossing on 14th, you won't have to look both ways anymore, right? It's just going to be free and clear. You're going to need to make sure you watch out for bikes and peds, but no longer vehicles. And then we did also add a number of ADA directional tile elements, and we do have some signage and striping to help to alert individuals on bikes and people walking in the area that you do need to pay special attention to people using the area. And like I said, we also relocated those ADA spots to be as close as physically possible that we could after we had to remove them on the area. And then we actually are working with the Office of General Services to potentially make some improvements on access to the city and county building that should reflect where the ADA spots are being relocated. Those talks are still a little bit early, so I can't talk about any of the details there, but we are actively working on that, and it is 100% a priority.
Great. Thank you very much, Jay. Mark, maybe you can help us with this, especially as we move into phase 2. There's a lot of, it looks like there's clearly a lot of folks who organize a lot of events in this area asking great questions. One of those is, will you be adding additional infrastructure that would alleviate pressure on large events like power, water, etc.?
That is a great question. And, I have to say with my years of working within Civic Center, working with the event organizers, I've become familiar firsthand with some of the ongoing challenges in being able to produce these events. And so we will be going into phase 2 at the outset, understanding, what are the needs to properly support these events. And so in short, yes, we will be looking at what kind of infrastructure, whether it's electrical hookups, water, anything of that sort, that would help support these events and really create a space that's sustainable too. So we're not getting into situations where events are operating using generators and things of that sort. We really want to truly make this a space that is flexible, again, not only for day-to-day use, but also for the special events.
Awesome, thank you. One other event organizing question. As far as these new elements go, the furniture, the street furniture, etc., when large events happen, who is responsible for moving those things? And then, yeah, can you maybe start with that one, Jay?
Yeah, so for the year 2020, so this year, the city is going to take that on. And so you'll continue to work with the Office of Special Events. They'll be able to show you kind of the footprint, they'll advise maybe what you should keep and maybe what you should remove. And then the idea, although not confirmed yet, is that starting potentially in 2021, or maybe it'll get kicked to 2022, is that would be folded in to the actual event organizers' tasks as just as something to take into account. And so that's still a little up in the air. We're still discussing that and working very closely with the Office of Special Events. But at least for this year, no one has to worry about that. It will be handled by the city.
Great, thanks, Jay. We are getting a number of great questions and we're almost out of time. So I just wanted to let everyone know, first of all, if you have comments, we are capturing them. We do get a report at the end of this. And again, if your question is not answered, please reach out to Jay or Mark following this for some direct questions. But one final question is, do you all anticipate that this closure will tie in with the Acoma Art District plan between 9th and 13th, or any other kind of plans in the area that this is tying into? Mark, do you want to start with that one?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, we will, when we look at this again at the outset, we were going to take a holistic look at the Civic Center district and really just better understand the network of parks, public spaces, key connections when it comes to transportation mobility, and what opportunities are there for us to really elevate the significance and importance of Bannock within that context. So Coma would be one of those connections that we'll look at, because we do recognize that with Bannock being a part of the street grid today, presently, that we are going to have to look creatively at how we transition at the ends of Colfax and at 14th. So where it goes from there, that's to be determined.
Great, thank you. Jay, do you have any final comments, or Mark, any final comments before we close?
I just wanted to thank everyone for joining this evening and for just being patient as we work through some of the technical difficulties with this. But I personally am very excited about moving forward with phase 2 and really look forward to engaging the community even more as we look into the future for the long-term permanent transformation of Bannock.
Yeah, likewise, want to thank everyone for their participation on here, and just let everyone know that if you're in the area, take a look at Bannock. It's already under construction, and within a few weeks it will be done, and we'll have that bright, colorful mural out there, which will be a little bit of positive news amidst a lot of the kind of bad news stories floating around and some of the tough stuff going on. So hopefully it brings a little bit of joy. And we will have a piece coming out soon about the mural, some of the specific art elements, what they mean as far as the culture of the city, what we're going through right now, and all of that. It's very well done by Pat Milbury, and so expect to see that probably on the news sometime here soon.
Great. Well, no surprise, I too want to thank everyone. It's a beautiful night out, so we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and learn more about the project. Definitely continue to reach out with us, or to us. We will continue to find new ways to engage folks in this new virtual world. We'll let you all know if we have when we have other ways to collect feedback. So thanks again for your participation, and we hope everyone has a great evening. Take care.